Hello, today I'm joined by Michelle McPhillips, whose son was sadly killed on our streets. The perpetrator has not yet been caught and brought to justice.
Got straight to the news, loud all the bits, sick of this basic business. London Unite, stand up in the pits, I'm done with the boring news, watch this.
Hello Michelle, how
Hello.
are you?
Fine, thank you.
Thanks for joining me today. So Michelle, on May the 7th, you actually took part in the Enough is Enough campaign peace march. Why did you attend? Why was it important for you to attend?
I attended it to mark the fact that my son was one of the innocent people killed on the street for absolutely no reason, and I felt that march needed as much support as possible to bring the message to the general public that our children are being killed on the streets. And the two ladies that were running it are very, very good at what they do, and basically they made me feel comfortable enough to come along and join in on that march and support them as well, and the other mothers that have lost their children on the streets as well.
But we need to work with them and support them to achieve our goal. We need to report what we've seen, we need to record the goings-ons and hand it over. The wall of silence needs to be broken down.
I hope it's made awareness to people generally, because up until my son got killed, I was just like, oh, it's another murder on the street. But until it actually affects you and your family or your close friend, then you don't realise how bad this problem has actually become. I've read in the media that in 14 days there's been 13 deaths to knife crime on the streets, and it is our young children that are killing each other. So something needs to be done about it. Just to lose one son, just to lose one person in your life like this, it really is too much. So enough is enough.
What do you know about the day that Jonathan James lost his life?
That day I left my son at 5:30 in the afternoon. I was in the kitchen in my mum's house playing with his two children and him. And I said to him, I'll see you after work, because I usually drove up to him after I finished work because I run a pub in Islington. I was working on the bar and we had karaoke that evening, and my phone rang and it was his cousin telling me Jonathan's been stabbed. And apparently the scream that came out of me switched off the sound limiter. So I just left and went straight to the scene of where I was told my son was.
Once we get there in the car, are you able to just tell us overall to what the area is like?
That area on that particular night is a very busy area. There's 4 or 5 clubs and pubs next door to each other.
Was it the weekend? Or?
It was a Friday night.
Oh, right, okay.
It was just after midnight that the incident took place, and it's a very, very busy area. As of yet, we've got no witnesses. We're still appealing to people to come forward. There's this stupidness of the wall of silence. Well, the wall of silence is if you actually know something, you're as guilty as the person that put the knife in my son, if you don't come forward with whatever information you think may be relevant towards helping solve this crime. This street here is called Cross Street.
Okay.
My pub is situated in Essex Road, and I had to drive up this street, and I got told that my son was outside the club called Be At One, where he was receiving first aid from the door staff there, which I'm eternally grateful to those people. And believe it or not, I've lived in this borough for over 45 years, and that particular moment I could not think where Be At One club is. And I just kept thinking, get me to Upper Street, get me to Upper Street, I will find him. And then as I came here at the top of Cross Street,
yes,
I seen the ambulance over to my right, and I just knew that's where my son was.
And what was your initial thought to when you reached your son?
I just hoped that my son had been stabbed where he could have been repaired, and I didn't want to think of the consequences, but knowing what I've seen in the press, knowing what I've seen the posters in the street, I knew it was going to be bad. What I actually turned up to was my son laying on the floor being given first aid by the paramedics, and they were just picking him up to put him onto the stretcher because they had him on an oxygen mask because he couldn't breathe properly. And as they picked him up to put him onto the stretcher, that's the first time that the blood started to come out of his body because he was bleeding internally. But we didn't actually know that at that moment. And then I got into the back of the ambulance with JJ, and the first and last thing he did was he reached over and grabbed my hand and said, "Mum." And I said to him, just lay back, listen to the lady and breathe. Little tiny breaths, just keep breathing for me. So basically I had to stand at the side of the ambulance, and I actually felt, after about a minute or two, I actually felt a big breath come out of me. And I said to my mum, "I think he's died." And my mum said, "Don't be, have faith, he's going to survive this." And I looked over, because she said, "Look, they're working on him." And I seen them massaging his heart with their hands and pumping the bags so that they could get it. And then they pulled him up and hooked his feet up on a hook to get the blood back up to the upper part of the body, obviously. And then we went straight to the hospital. When we arrived at the Royal London, they just took him straight in, and I had to wait an excruciating 2.5 hours to be told that they had to restart my son's heart 4 times. But as the doctor walked towards me, I just looked at him and said, "Tell me." And he said, "He's breathing, but he's very, very poorly." And I said, "Is it 50-50? And he went, "No." He said, 10-90, 90 the other side. He said, "He's a very, very sick man. Very, very sick." And there was 2 ladies in the waiting room, and I knew they were church people, and I just said to them, "Can you start praying for me and my son?" I said, "I need him to be well, to come back to me." Well, they brought him back and put him in ICU for 4 days. And in those 4 days, I kept asking the doctors, check his brain, because I didn't see any reactions. Like the eyes weren't moving, the eyelids weren't flickering.
Yeah.
And I just kept saying to them, "Please check his brain." So they did a CAT scan, and they came back and said it wasn't good. And I said, "How bad?" And she said, "It's really not good." And I said, "Switch the machine off, because my son wouldn't want to be living where he couldn't communicate and feed and go to the toilet by himself." Because he was very outgoing, JJ, very outgoing, as in going out, socialising with people. So I knew he would just feel trapped. But they said I couldn't switch the machines off there and then, because they had to do some more brain tests to make sure it was all legal and done properly. So I asked for that. So on the 28th of February, 4 days later, they came to me at 6:45 and pronounced Jonathan brain dead due to lack of oxygen and blood to the brain.